Matthias's father passed not long after Lugan. With his family, Matthias's taste in women seemed to die. He didn't have the time. Delacies was the High Lord, bless his soul. Matthias loved his brother, but the tax on flame-forged steel is idiotic. We need the funds for the war northward. Magnus has more money than we do. What kind of smith has such money that he could buy the High Lord's seat? Delacies, Magnus is as stubborn as a boulder and twice as hard to move. He'll just stop making blades in protest. After all, what kind of tax only affects one man? We need money, Matthias. Money for soldiers, for mercenaries, for bribes, for the ministry. We need those blades, brother. Sharper and stronger than any other. And what better a bribe for the ministry? And 100 other arguments. True, several were not in Matthias's favor, but the majority... The laws and rulings passed. Matthias let them, brewing over laws and codes. Northerner raids were becoming more common. Bloody swaths were torn through their lands northward. The people were angry. Delacies was getting outmaneuvered at every turn. Matthias looked at the letter resting on the table. The orders. He tapped a finger again and again on the wood. Then he signed the letter with a heavy heart and sent the shaggy black bird to find the assassin. It won't be long now, Delacies. I can't believe you talked me into this, grumbled Delacies. The High Lord sat uncomfortably on a stool, his finest coat and cape leaving him hot in the study. Be still, Matthias ordered. His brush swished across the canvas. He would have his brother's image, lively and begrudgingly happy, forever. Episode 11. Familiar Faces, Familiar Places. The party, dedicated to giving Katarina a proper Krakenman burial, placed her within the entomber's coffin, as it had the most quality amongst those left behind by the gravediggers. They began the long trek through snow to the sea. Fenrir sent Samwise ahead to scout, because the snow still limited vision. As the dog disappeared into the snow, the bells and horns silenced one after another, leaving the relative quiet of howling winds. A bark is heard ahead, its singularity signifying the friendliness of the encounter. A robust woman knelt in the snow playing with the dog. Her emerald eyes brightened as she saw them. "I have been looking for you," she exclaimed with a voice choked by a muddy accent. "Looking for us?" Fenrir asked, as Malara and Elidas eyed the woman with suspicion. "I search for a stick of a man who has robbed me. I don't trust the locals for this task, and a hound master could give me great use." "You sure he in city?" "I got a piece of his cloak," she said, lifting a small piece of gray cloth that violently twitched in her hand. "It was a very distinctive cloak." Unfortunately, the cloth smelt most of the woman herself. Guinevere, as the woman was called, offered her assistance on the party's own quests, in exchange for their help on hers. To reach the sea, they would need to forge their way through the ruined part of the city. On their way there, they passed Megan's brothel. Emerging from the door of the crude establishment came Jonathan. "Jonathan!" Fenrir cried. "Where have you been?" Jonathan jolted, straightening and turning toward the party. He grinned and signed. "Oh, I've been here and there. Avoiding the firelight can give one quite a lot to do, and surely none of it as interesting as what you lot have been up to." Fenrir regaled Jonathan in his broken tandem of the battles and mysteries that had occupied them till now. When telling of the bloody pit, and the fight with the twisted, demonic form of Katarina, Fenrir displayed the oversized heart, twisted with bone, as proof for the conflict with such a terrible and strange foe. Guinevere showed interest in the heart and the bloody pit, so the party decided to stop by the place it had been after Katarina's funeral. Jonathan dodged every query into his own doings around the city, though most assumed that he had gotten distracted by whoring. As they reached the rough barriers before the ruined part of the city, a man burst from them. Broad and powerfully built, he lunged at Fenrir, bellowing in the Kraken Man tongue. Their exchange was quick and brutal. Fenrir hacked with his axe, but the blade was turned ever so slightly, as to not debilitate his attacker. On the contrary, the larger Kraken Man slammed both of his long, curved knives into Fenrir's guts. More Kraken Men burst from the surrounding rubble as a true fight broke out. Elidus downed the big pirate, as Malara dragged Fenrir back to heal him with his vial. Krakenman pirates did the same for their leader, and Fenrir finally recognized his attacker. "Stop! Stop!" Fenrir shouted. Then, when the combatants obeyed, "Bjorn, what reason do you have to attack me with such viciousness?" "You abandoned mother and father like a rat. You foisted your hounds on the backs of incapable men." "I left seeking for Grandma and our sister. I took what I could, but the hounds were too many to travel light in foreign lands." "Men and hounds are dead now," Bjorn snarled. The rest of the party watched in curious confusion as the two Krakenmen spoke their own tongue to one another. "And they died while not under my care. How am I responsible? Now our own sister is at risk." "What?" "She has gone missing, with many other girls here. Brother, I beg you, help us." One of the pirates screamed from the snow. A hairy, naked man peeled a sword made of bone from the Krakenman's chest, and laughed. His head was a mass of bony thorns, and his flesh was pierced by twisting horns. More men, naked and twisted by evil, came forth, and battle resumed. Lumps of snow moved, and the first to meet a pirate exploded in a burst of gore. Elidus took it upon himself to kill the lumps before more harm could be caused. Bjorn spat on the last suitor as it died. "These monsters infest this city." "All the more reason to aid me in recovering our sister," Fenrir said. Bjorn scowled and nodded. The large group isn't hindered much by the additional suitors they encounter. The creatures seemed to sense the blood of their brethren and the strength of their foes. This effect is aided by the snows dying and full sight returning to Elidus, whose threat range posed great hardship for the brutally simple beasts. So it was that the crew under Bjorn, brother of Fenrir, joined in for Katarina's funeral and watched in solemn solidarity as they let their dead float the waves one last time. Fenrir, with the freedom of his native tongue, bothered Bjorn with his adventures up to this point. Bjorn tolerated this to the best of his ability, though his tolerance was lacking for an older brother. However, while gritting his teeth in impatience, Bjorn perked up at the telling of the bloody pit. Hearing that they planned to return to the place it had been, he decided to join them, despite the trip subjecting him to more of Fenrir's pestering. Fresh blood poured from underneath the snow into the manhole to the sewers. "The blood is back," Fenrir said. Down into the sewers, through the sinews and bone of the hall, they came once more to the pool of blood, the pillars of bone and the old mirror that showed witches as demons. Guinevere seemed elated at the picture of herself in the mirror. She reached for it greedily. "Wait!" cried Elidas, reaching for the woman. But Bjorn stopped him and whispered, "If what Fenrir says is true, then we will want for the powers granted here." Elidas didn't look at Bjorn, but at his reflection. Guinevere readied herself as she drew up the towering form of a demon. Bjorn looked on with shocked horror before grinning. Beside the towering demoness is a reflection of Bjorn in the twisted form of a suitor. The monstrous creature pulled ribs from its sides for blades and snarled.